It's a great pleasure for me to greet the very first woman, First Minister of Scotland, First Leader of the Scottish National Party, because I'm Welsh, at least half Welsh. But I'm not going to make too much of that. I just want to reassure the First Minister this one thing, right at the beginning of policy statement, because you've caused a lot of headlines in one or two of your appearances, particularly in Vogue. I won't comment on your appearance if you don't comment on mine.
It's a deal.
It's a deal, and I want to show I came armed because in my top pocket is a Scottish lion. It's a beautiful embroidered handkerchief, but it says underneath English laundry, so I conceal that. So this morning, we had a very significant event at 8 o'clock this morning. Into Parliament went the First Minister's bill, domestic violence against women. It's been drafted, it's been gone through all the legal processes, and it's a very, very important piece of legislation, which I hope it will become, because in England and Wales, and in Scotland too, violence against women is a scourge. It's the same in the United States. In fact, it's so bad, just to go a Scottish, in a British English example, in England and Wales, there's a phone call to the police every 1 minute of the day from a harassed mother, a harassed wife. In Scotland, there's a call to the police. It's better. It's still not good enough. Every 9 minutes in Scotland, there's a call. Every 9 minutes. Okay, take it. It's the police that are going, yes, that's enough, thank you. We got the point. Every 9 minutes, that call goes, and it's a woman in fear, possibly her life. Now, how is your criminal justice bill in Scotland going to address this fantastic, appalling amount of domestic violence?
Well, let me come on to that directly in a second, but firstly, just to agree with you about the scale of the problem. In Scotland, there are estimated to be about 60,000 instances of domestic violence every year. And that's bad enough, but what makes it worse is that it's also estimated that only 1 in 5 incidents are reported to the police. So the actual scale is much bigger than that number would suggest. I mean, I believe passionately that domestic violence is often a symptom of gender inequality, the power imbalances in our society, but it's also a cause of gender inequality. So we're never going to have true gender equality until we tackle and eradicate violence against women. That's why the legislation that we've introduced in the Scottish Parliament today is so important. It's not the only thing we're doing. I was struck by the protest at the premiere of Suffragette this week, people protesting against cuts in budgets for domestic violence. In Scotland, we've increased the budget to tackle domestic violence, but the bill does 3 things in particular. It creates what's called an aggravator. So if a man commits an offence and domestic violence is a factor in that offence, then it will be treated as an aggravation when it comes to sentencing. Secondly, it introduces a law against revenge porn.
What is revenge porn?
Well, revenge porn is where a spurned partner uses intimate images on the internet to humiliate and degrade a woman. It's an absolutely despicable...
You mean some men put images of their wife?
And it's, well, a partner, former partner, wife, girlfriend, whatever, and it's an absolutely despicable way of degrading and humiliating a woman. It should be a crime, and this legislation...
Is it not a crime at the moment?
It's not a specific crime. But the third thing this bill seeks to do, and I think it's really important, is it makes sure that in court cases where somebody's been tried for abuse against women, then a judge can give directions to a jury that will explain something that juries sometimes find difficult to understand, like, for example, why it often takes a victim of abuse several years to have the courage to report it. Often juries will look at that and think that that somehow undermines the veracity of what a woman is saying. So this bill will make sure that factors like that are properly explained to juries. And taken together, it's not going to, in and of itself, eradicate violence against women, but it will help us take a big step forward.
Very good. One of the complaints I get occasionally when I hear to women is that when they call the police, I'm talking about the United States mainly now, they feel though they're working against somebody who's not really sympathetic. It was another one of those calls, oh, for God's sake, you take it. How can you cope with training the police in Scotland to be sympathetic to something which must be a damn nuisance? Because quite often, I dare say, the calls are vexatious and not really quite as significant as we think they are.
I don't think any call from a woman reporting abuse should ever be treated as vexatious, and it should always be treated as really serious. There's been an awful lot of work done in the police service in Scotland to train police officers to treat domestic abuse much more seriously. And as a result of that, we're seeing the rate of prosecution go up very sharply.
Oh, good.
There's also a dedicated unit within the Crown Office, which is our system of prosecution, to make sure that cases where it's possible are brought to court. So there's a massive effort going into this, and that's absolutely right and proper. As I said earlier on, I believe more passionately than I believe in many things that we need to drive forward gender equality, but we won't do that while so many women in our society are still held back by violence and abuse.
Yes, exactly. Can I ask you, one of the things which struck me looking from abroad was your very strong stand on human rights law. Now, there's a movement in the Conservative Party to withdraw from the Human Rights Act. What is your attitude? Why are you so keen on having a human rights law, which now pertains in England, Scotland and Wales? And what would you do, what can you do to stop maverick Tories, as I see them, from destroying something?
Are there any other type? I don't know. Are there any other type?
You can criticise Conservatives here. You can actually criticise Labour too. It's a free hall, okay? So just, what's your...
I just find the notion that in a civilised country, we could even be talking about repealing human rights legislation. It is absolutely unthinkable.
Okay. Well, look. I'm going to be a little Englander for a moment, and I'm going to.
You're Welsh.
No, but still, I can pretend. Here's the point. What do you say to somebody if I'm speaking for their voices? Why should we be run by these Europeans? We've got a sturdy British sense of freedom. Why do we want to kowtow to these people in Brussels? That's what they say. What do you say to them when they say...
Human rights are universal. They should apply in every country regardless of where we happen to be. And the irony, and this is the bit I can't quite work out about what the Tories are trying to do, and I'm not sure they've worked it out yet either, is if you withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights, then what you actually do is make it necessary for people who want to assert their human rights in the court to go to Strasbourg, because what they lose by doing that is the right to assert those human rights in domestic court. So it seems to be completely contrary to the stated objective of what they're trying to do. But, you look at the European Convention on Human Rights, the right to life, the right to liberty, the right to family. Which of these rights would we seriously argue are not essential? And what really appalls me is not just the impact domestically. You see governments now in some of the most illiberal countries in the world, Russia, Zimbabwe being two cases that Dominic Grieve, the former Tory Attorney General, to his credit, has cited. These countries actually citing the UK wanting to pull out of the Human Rights Act as a justification for them not observing human rights. That's not the image we should have in the world, surely.
Right. So, what kind of threat, you probably don't like making threats, but let me give you an idea. What kind of threat can you make if the rump of the Conservative Party, or whatever they call themselves, do you think they'll get support from Labour for this?
Well, there's two, I don't want to get overly technical here, but let me take the House of Commons first of all. There's a number of Tory MPs don't think that the Human Rights Act should be repealed. So if you've got Labour, and I certainly hope Labour would vote against the repeal of the Human Rights Act, if you've got Labour, the SNP and some Tory rebels, then it is possible to defeat David Cameron on this, and that's what we'll be working hard to do. The second thing, and this is where I'm at risk of getting a bit technical, because this has an impact on the Scottish Parliament, the European Convention on Human Rights is hardwired into the legislation that established the Scottish Parliament. So it is, in my view, inevitable that the UK government would need the Scottish Parliament to consent to this change. And let me tell you, I don't think there is any chance of the Scottish Parliament consenting. So with both of those factors, I'm optimistic that this hugely backward step can be defeated, and I think it will be one of the best defeats possible to inflict on David Cameron.
But you feel you feel as strongly. I mean, I'm relying on. That's another call. Okay, we got the point. That's another call from another distressed person in Scotland. We've had 9 minutes. So you see the scale of the problem? I didn't answer that call because it's only 9 minutes. We've got another 9 minutes for another call, and we name up there on the stage by then. But anyway, that's the point. Your bill will actually, it seems, make a difference to that in that area. Let me ask you this. One of the things you've also been very strong about, to the surprise of many people, is support for Europe. I think you've actually said somewhere that it would be an issue on which you would feel provoked enough. You generally don't want a second referendum at the moment. I understand that. I'm not asking that. But how strongly do you feel about, for Scotland, the Scottish SNP staying in Europe?
I think it's overwhelmingly in Scotland's interest. I actually think it's in the UK's interest to stay within the European Union. I don't think the European Union is perfect. I think there's lots of things about it that need to change, that I would like to see change. But for economic reasons, for social reasons, for cultural reasons, I think we should be remaining within the European Union, and I'll be arguing that case very strongly as we head towards a referendum on the issue.
And the whole SNP, you have the support of your whole party on that?
I'm not saying every single member of the SNP will agree with that. There will be, but the SNP's position as a party will be to argue for the UK to remain within the European Union.
And that's pretty unambiguous.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you another question, rising from that. I appreciate, as many people will, your realization of the values of association with Europe. Why aren't the same values appreciated in association with England and Wales?
That is a good question, and it's a question I'm often asked. The European Union is a union of independent countries, and I would like to see Scotland be an independent member of the European Union. All independent countries in the modern world pool sovereignty to some extent, and being a member of the European Union does that. I also, and this is a point that maybe my party down the years hasn't always got across often enough, wanting Scotland to be independent is about wanting Scotland to have the political and economic powers of an independent country. It's not about ripping up the other aspects of union between Scotland and the rest of the UK, the social, family, cultural unions that exist. There are many things that bind Scotland and the other nations of the UK together that I wouldn't want to see broken, because an independent Scotland and an independent England, which would follow as a result, would always be absolutely the best of friends.
Okay, I'm very conscious of the fact that when I was newspaper editor here, of the British press, including me, I think, regarding Scotland is slightly different. And in fact, the perception through the British press of Scottish politics seems to me to be very skewed. Do you feel any? I'm not asking you to be paranoid about this. I'm interested because this morning, when I read the newspaper this morning, and online too, there was Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister, saying that you were being doubly betrayed by the government, that in fact the devolution of power that was promised following the Smithson Commission isn't going to give you the leeway which you want to look after welfare policies in Scotland as well as you would like. Now, were you shocked by that? Do you regard it as a piece of distortion by the press, or do you think Gordon Brown's kind of...
I'm shocked that it's taken Gordon Brown so long to realise that we're not being given
Yes.
the extra powers that we were promised, and that's a live debate in the Westminster Parliament just now. During the very final days of the referendum campaign last year, Gordon Brown and David Cameron all joined together. Nick Clegg at the time joined together to say, "Vote no, Scotland, and we'll give you, the equivalent of." Federalism within the United Kingdom. It hasn't quite worked out like that, but that's a debate we're still having. On the more general issue of the press, I mean, I think it's a brave thing to do to ask a politician not to be paranoid about the press, but anyway, you know, I think one of the things about, if I can use this term, and it's not a term I particularly like using, but I'll use it for shorthand, the London media, is that it has tended not always to be very well informed about what's happening in Scotland. But I actually think that's changed a bit since the referendum, when there was so much interest in what was happening. It's also changed a bit since the SNP won the general election in Scotland so emphatically. So I hope that by the time we have another general election, the Daily Mail won't be so badly informed as to describe me as the most dangerous woman in Britain.
One of the things you're really passionate about, I understand it, like me, we share something. I was the first member of my family to go to university. Yeah. You were the first member of your family to go to university. Is that where the passion for education comes from?
It's part of it. I mean, I had instilled in me by my mum and dad, I had a passion for education, from way, way before I realised that what it was. But very much the fact that I got the opportunity to go to university. We don't have tuition fees for university in Scotland, and I feel very, very strongly about that, because if I, all these years ago, had to pay tuition fees or even incur large debts to pay them off at some point in the future, I don't think I would have been able to go to university. My mum and dad would have wanted me to, but I just don't think it would have been possible. Now, I had the opportunity for a free university education. Probably one of the biggest factors in my ability to now do what I do in life. I've got no right to take that away from any young person coming up behind me, and I feel that very, very strongly.
Good. But you first were you first passionate in politics about the Trident deal? I read somewhere that that's what turned you on. Is that right?
I think you should rephrase that question, Sir Harold. I feel also quite passionately in opposition to nuclear weapons, not from any sort of naive, simplistic world view. The world is a dangerous place. There are many challenges, particularly right now. I just don't think nuclear weapons are the answer to those challenges. And at a time of continued austerity, when working families across the UK are about to see their tax credits cut with really quite significant impact, the idea that as that's happening, we're also planning to spend £100 billion in a new generation of Trident, I just find inexplicable. Strong conventional military forces are what we need. I don't think we need a new generation of nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I understand. Another strong point, when you were earlier in the discussion here, you mentioned gender equality. You are committed, I think, to a 50-50 quota.
I've got a 50-50 cabinet. I understand, of only 3 in the world.
And you have a 50-50. You have 50-50 in Scotland. You changed your mind, because once you were against quotas. What changed your mind?
I've argued for. Actually, I've been on the losing side of this debate often in my party down the years. I've argued for positive action, and I do believe in quotas. I'd love to think we'd get there without them, but it's taken an awful long time to get there without them. So I think we need to, accelerate that progress. I've got a 9-year-old niece. I don't want, by the time she's a young woman, or a woman of my age, I don't want her and her generation still to be fighting these battles. I want us to actually try and win these battles for the next generation of women. So quotas, I do think the time has come. I've appointed a 50-50 cabinet. It's depressing to be told that is only one of only 3 in the developed world, but I'm proud that ours is one of them. We're challenging private companies, public sector boards to also have gender balance. I've set a 50-50 by 2020 challenge. So we're going to keep trying to make progress on this, because I don't believe it is right, and I don't believe it is good for any of us if we continue to underuse the talents of more than 50% of our population.
Exactly. I have an idea which I want to, and since I'm addressing the First Minister of Scotland, I'm on my knees here with an idea to present to First Minister. Here's my idea. We have a thing called a depreciation allowance in every country. So if machinery is taken out, you can get an allowance for replacing it. What about an appreciation allowance, in which every board in the country that does not have 50% is taxed on an appreciation tax, or they can claim relief from other tax if they have a 50% board. Introduce an appreciation tax in the name...
Do you know, if I say yes to this, the front page of the Daily Mail tomorrow is going to be Sturgeon threatens to tax companies unless they get rid of men. But it's an interesting idea.
I was very proud of that idea.
It's an interesting idea.
I thought it was a good idea, an appreciation tax, but I'm going to campaign for it.
I can get off the hook at the moment because the Scottish Parliament wouldn't currently have the power to do that. But it is a very interesting idea.
Now let's turn to... In this refugee crisis, we've had a fantastic lead from another woman leader, Angela Merkel. We had the Minister for Defence yesterday explaining their policy. You started off with welcoming or being willing to receive 1,000 refugees. You've increased it now to 2,000.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Those percentages are actually the same as England and Wales, 1%, under 0.4%, I think. What do you think about matching Germany's 1%? 800,000 refugees into Germany is 1% of the German population, roughly.
I think, let me get this clear, I think the UK should be doing more. The 2,000 that you cite that Scotland has said will take is a percentage of what the UK has agreed to do. We can't take refugees independently of the United Kingdom government because it controls the borders of the United Kingdom. What I've said is however many the UK government agrees to take, Scotland will prepare to take a fair share. But I think the UK government should be planning to take more than 20,000 over the next 5 years. And I also think that the UK should be playing more of a role in a collective European approach to this, not just, although this is important, saying that we'll accept refugees from camps around Syria, but also looking to help with those who are currently in Europe. I mean, my view of this is, I guess, boils down to being quite simple. This is a humanitarian crisis, perhaps the biggest Europe has seen since the Second World War. And unless we come together to deal with it, we're not going to deal with it. No one country, not even Germany, whose approach has been commendable, can deal with this on their own. If we come together collectively, then we might have a chance of a response that is commensurate to the scale of the challenge. So the UK should be part of that collective response, in my view. The last point I would make about this is we must, and I think there has been progress in this in recent weeks, we must stop mixing up economic migration with asylum and refugee status.
Last question. On what terms would you be willing to form a government with the Labour Party, a coalition?
I'm not sure Labour will be forming a government with anybody.
But I mean, it's happened once before. So, I mean, you can lay down your conditions now, but you haven't got much time. So if you want a couple of years to think it over, call me up.
Jeremy, give me a call. But look, before the general election, I was very, like many people, I was very disappointed the Tories won another majority. I said if there wasn't a Tory majority, we would work with Labour and other progressive parties to form an alternative government. Ed Miliband didn't like that idea. I think if he'd been much more positive about it, he might have done better. But anyway, that's in the past. I will always seek to work with people of progressive opinion for progressive government, because I think that is in the interest, not just of Scotland, I think it's in the interest of people across the UK.
Very good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've had a demonstration there of why the First Minister of Scotland has universal popularity, and you can see some of the strength, steel strength, I would say, from Scotland, originality of Scotland, how some of those qualities can now be used for the benefit of women everywhere, which is one of your ambitions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.